It's fantastic to have Adbusters here, culture jammers, principal, or maybe I shouldn't say principal, key instigators of the Occupy movement. Perhaps they might dispute that way of describing them. Adbusters, for many of us, have been incredibly important reinterpreters, retranslators of our media. And so within the context of this public program, particularly today and last night, the focus on the idea of what it means to address the public, what it means to give information to a body of people called the public. Adbusters have been key in rethinking the mechanisms and the content of that act. How do we think about, produce and reformulate the information that is given to us by news media organizations, by what we consider to be the public and increasingly capitalized and privatized press. This is the subject and the focus of much of Adbusters' work in both their publications and the other activities they've been involved in, which they will talk about. Adbusters are journalists, activists and organizers, and in that light we're very pleased to welcome them to the stage. Adbusters, thank you very much.
Thank you. Should I talk into this microphone or that microphone? We both have microphones? Let's get comfortable up here, Pedro. Well, you go here, I'll go here. We're breaking the commercial narrative right now, actually. This is orchestrated. Thank you so much for having us here. My name is Darren Fleet, and I'm the senior editor of Adbusters, and this is Pedro, and he is our creative director, who does much of our incredible artwork. I really want to thank those poems. It's incredible when I hear something like that, because it reminds me how incredibly global the world is now, and that we are all kind of caught up in very much a global moment. So the statistics about 23 million liters of urine and using people's shit to run houses. I am not kidding you. I live in a house where the shit rolls downhill to fund a new eco-development that was built for the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver as a symbol of a global city. So I want to talk a little bit about context, because coming into Turkey is really interesting for us. I think Adbusters has been invited several places over our history, and often, because we're so North American, we grew up in a very North American context, sometimes some of what we have to say is only for a specific group in a society that isn't in kind of the post-consumer world that we live in North America. But I do want to talk about one thing that is incredibly relevant. We are in what we call the global algorithm of capitalism. Capitalism is the operating system of where we live. And so when I come off of the plane in Istanbul and I see these signs that say, Istanbul 2020, global city, Olympics. And I think, they just hired the people from Vancouver, because it's literally identical. And then when I drive down that freeway and I see the Toki buildings, and I think, oh, I have one of these by my house. And really this is happening. So what you're experiencing here is the same as what I'm experiencing where I'm from. Now there is a... Can I just say as well, in Rio as well, it's basically the same now with the Olympics there.
Whoa, hello? Hello. So in Rio as well, it's the same thing. So basically you have a lot of gentrification, pretty much the whole idea of being a global city as well in Brazil.
Yeah, and in Vancouver, which is a place which is where our headquarters is, which is, I think, how it is a bit different from Istanbul and from Sao Paulo, is that, I mean, Canada's a G8 country, it's one of the wealthiest places in the world, and you still see the same process. This sort of creation of a global network of global elite. And you see it everywhere, even from taking the facades of the buildings and then building a new one over top of it. So that's kind of how I wanted to start. And it was really interesting with the protesters who came to the meeting last night when they started talking about capitalism, and then they hold up this sign that says, "Can we be human?" And I'm like, oh, these guys are stealing all our ideas. And I was actually really hoping they would stay, but unfortunately they did not. But anyway, I want to kind of go into a bit of our presentation here. This is actually, can we just go back for a second, Pedro?
Yeah.
So this is, we just published a book called Meme Wars, The Creative Destruction of Neoclassical Economics. I think Pedro is going to go grab it. And a lot of people are asking, what are you going to do after Occupy Wall Street? And this book is something that we have been working on for actually 4 years.
And basically, it's this is the hardcover edition. It was released by Seven Story Press in the US and Canada, and Penguin in the UK. And it has a cover that is made of sandpaper, basically. And the title reads, The Creative Destruction of Neoclassical Economics. And the idea is that this book is supposed to be in the economics department in the library, so when you put in and put out, it would destroy all the books around in terms of economics, you know.
Exactly, and of course the reference to creative destruction goes back to a very famous neoclassical economist in America who described capitalism as a process of creative destruction. But this is one of my favorite spreads from the book, and it simply says, professors of the future will begin every lesson with a minute of silence. And this has to do with kind of the process we're in the sense of loss. So Pedro, if you could just flip through here some of these images. This is what we're talking about now. So when I land in Istanbul and I see the same project that's happening in Vancouver, that's happening in Sao Paulo, that's happening in London, that's happening in Mumbai, you begin to realize that the algorithm of capitalism has taken on a completely new form. So this is basically the dream for Istanbul. I live in a place that is the end of that dream. So it's so interesting for me when I talk to certain activists in Turkey and they say, you know, us in Istanbul, some people, they're looking at Greece and they're looking at the UK and they're looking at America and smiling that they're tripping and going, now's our chance. Now's our chance to get ahead of the race. And this is how the global, what we're starting to call the God of growth, is maneuvering around. The market, neoliberalism, I mean, I'm not telling you anything new here, but I'm coming from a place which is the end of that, which is suffering from the ultimate reeling effect. Now, there is another element here, which is climate change is probably going to be, what did that former head of the World Bank call it, the greatest economic failure of all time? He was actually, it was, what was his name? It was Nicholas Stern. And this is an incredible world we live in, when the former head of a World Bank can stand up to the international community and say climate change is the greatest economic failure of all time, and nothing changes. This is a terrifying place to be in. He said this in 2006. So what does it mean? How do we break the spell of this growth? Now, most people think the only thing that is going to wake somebody up is a catastrophe. This is something that Naomi Klein talked about in Disaster Capitalism, but unfortunately, generally what happens is when disaster capitalism reaches, it even gives you more. So I can give you an example. The 2008 crisis which really hit North America quite hard and hit Europe quite hard, the response was to do more of the same. And I distinctly remember in the United States and in Canada, the response by the government was the exact same response to 9/11, which is keep consuming. I'm not kidding. George Bush went on television in 2001 and said, okay, the buildings are down, keep consuming. We'll consume our way out of this. And 2008, identical speech. Okay, things are bad, keep consuming. So this is... Yeah.
And actually, if you don't consume, you know, you might be the cause of actually more financial crisis.
Well, you're an enemy of the state if you don't consume. So this is kind of the culture that Adbusters was born into and is a response to. But if I can just say one more thing here. So this is, do you all know what this is? We call it the graph, but this is actually your life, okay? So USA debt, can we flip forward once? So Australia, Greece, so this could be, let's see, Fulya, Erdemci, Andrea, your sex life, waistline, bank account, education, good looks, Turkish government, economy, bank account. Every aspect of our lives is governed by this. The myth of progress has infiltrated everything that we do. And this, at Adbusters, has become our project. So when we first came onto this, oh, and of course, well, we can just follow up.
This, yes.
Yeah, this is what it's going to lead to. So let me flip through and talk about, yeah, this is growth. This is growth. Casino capitalism. Casino capitalism. Casino capitalism. Actually, if I just may say one thing, one way to talk about progress is images of factories and parades and military might and sexy women and this. This is another way to talk about progress, which is, this is a famous Chris Jordan image of a bird nowhere near any industrial center of the world, never seen a human in its life, full of so much trash from eating in the ocean that it's dead. And then crash. Okay, so as I said, Adbusters now, our big issue today is breaking the God of growth myth. Historically, in our context, the issue was consumption. And so we were trying to break the commercial narrative by showing kind of, oh, I love this one, capitalism is a dead dog. And this is, in North America, you have to understand, like, profoundly consumer-based society where people are identifying through the market. And one of the issues that came up last night is, you know, this is a great issue, is if you are, this notion that you can escape the system. This is a principle. Our principle at Adbusters has always been, you cannot get out of the algorithm of capitalism, okay? I think people have tried that. Now, I don't want to sound like a liberal and give up and just, oh, okay, capitalism wins, let them do what they want. We need to use what they've given us against them. And this has always been our premise. So how do we do that? One thing we talked about very early on was the idea of the mental environment. And I just want to say this quite quickly, which is in the same way you have a physical environment, you also have a mental environment, right? So this is the mental environment. So in the same way that the physical environment can be polluted with an oil spill, clear-cut logging, all of these sorts of things, your mental environment can also be polluted. The average North American is given about 3,000 advertising messages a day. And so the question is, since we can't stop people from going around with their eyes closed because you get hit by a car, we need to equip people with the tools in order to be able to deconstruct the advertising, or the tools to use that advertising against the system. And if I may say one thing again about the mental environment, is in my country, about 50% of the population is overweight, and depression and anxiety and mental illness is the #1 cause of workplace loss. So up until about a decade ago, generally, if someone had to miss work, it was because of an injury. Now everything is mental. So mental health is an epidemic. And one of the things that we've always said at Adbusters is maybe polluting the mental environment is having something to do with that. So, advertising. So again, I'm just giving you a bit of a background on our history and where we've come from. But this is obvious. I mean, this is kind of classic. Some of the tactics we have used is détournement, which is a situationist term where you kind of take the image and you flip it. You flip the meaning. So,
if I just could give a bit of context here, when during the 90s and the 2000s, basically the companies and the corporations, they realized that the power of image spoke much more than actually the actions. So basically there was called, the brands came along, you know, so it was about, it wasn't that Nike sponsor culture, it was that Nike became the culture. So basically, people gather around shopping malls. People had a social life that was all connected with products. You are what you buy, basically. So this is what was happening during the 2000s, and Adbuses was part of this by actually subverting, kind of creating, undermining these images with spoofs like that.
I actually love this one because the advertising creates the condition wherein you need the product that they're selling. But it can never make you truly happy because, as Pedro said, if they actually invented something that made you more beautiful, you'd never buy another beauty product again. And then you would be unpatriotic because you wouldn't be buying anything. I missed my lung. This one's incredible. And for us, most of us go around the world thinking that facts, information, changes our minds. This just isn't true. I know we like to go around and go, oh, we've got kind of a public space, and I'm going to be very reasonable, and you'll give me some information, and you'll give me some information, and you'll give me some information, and then I'll come to a rational decision in which my life will be better, the world will be better, my community will be better. All of the psychology and also behavioral evolutionary studies say, yeah, kinda, but really this isn't the case. Humans make decisions emotionally. Advertisers have known this for about 100 years. Politicians have known this for about 10,000 years. We, slow to catch on. But the idea of using these types of tactics is to get to the emotion. Because if I stand up and give you an emotional argument, or sorry, a rational argument, I give you facts, 99% of scientists agree that global warming is happening and that if the Earth heats up to 4 degrees, which most people think it will in the next 25 years, or sorry, 50 years, that it's game over, that the planet is going to die. That doesn't matter. So, this is facts. Other studies come out have shown, and this is funny, they say people who have an experience with climate change tend to think it's real. So if you're in a city and you've got air conditioning and you can still buy your products, yeah, climate change isn't happening. Of course not. It's not affecting your life. But if you're a villager and your crops die, or if you live anywhere near a coastline, or you live in the north of Canada, these people actually think it's happening because they're having an emotional experience with it. So anyway, Pierce, I promised I would tell you, just talk a little bit about tactics and what can happen when you use certain tactics. We got the scariest letter from a law firm about this image. And this is, there's risks involved. They're not the same risks in a place like Turkey, but there is risks. Here, the risk might be imprisonment, might be dealing with some social groups who don't agree with your ideas. In my part of the world, they just sue you and take your job. And so with this, we get letters from all the time, but this one was especially scary because they say we were ripping off their brand to sell our brand. And then what we did, which is true, which is directly the tactic, but we embarrassed them because when they sent us a lawyer letter, we published it in our magazine. And we never heard from them again. Again, these are some examples. That's Kate Moss, right? She uses cocaine, doesn't she? Yeah, she does. Branded babies, corporate America flag, corporations, no connection. This is another thing that we do quite often. So one option is detournement, which is you kind of subvert the image or the meaning of the image. Another one is juxtaposition, and we do juxtaposition quite often.
And it's quite important to say as well that the magazine kind of started with the whole idea of being a magazine with no ads. And that really breaks the whole idea of the graph that Darren was saying, that most of the magazines you kind of buy, you know how it goes, basically. You open up those 20 pages of advertising. You don't have to really pay attention to that, so you just flick through, just kind of like really not interested in that. And then there's the real magazine, and then the information really starts in a sense. And Adbuses, since because it doesn't have this idea that one need to sell more, being participating within the graph, there's a narrative to actually talk about. It's pretty much like a film. So you can say that it would be like a short film, a magazine like Adbuses, and all other magazines is like TV shows, that they you know, make your anxiety go up in those 15-minute slots, so when the actually breaks comes in, you know, you're going to be satisfied. All the anxiety you kind of created during the 15-minute slot is going to be sort of satisfied during the commercial break, which is all what the products have to offer. And this juxtaposition for us is very important because it allows us to sort of talk about how images are produced in this society. So,
sorry, this wasn't juxtaposition. Let me move on. There's a little McDonald's in everyone. Is this juxtaposition? No, this is more.
No, this is another campaign that we actually started, you know, so basically it's much easier. Yeah, this.
But this one is interesting. Like when you think of the incredible consumer society, which is what most countries in the world now are striving to, this is a real reality where you can take any child and they can name every brand on earth and every athlete who sponsors that brand. But you go outside and you go, hey, what kind of bird is that? Nobody knows. What kind of tree is that? Nobody knows. What kind of cloud is that? Nobody knows. This is juxtaposition. Yeah. There we go.
There you go.
Self-explanatory. This one we actually felt really, if you can go back to that one, this one we actually felt a little bit uneasy about. Often people submit things to our magazine, so it's also important to say that as both an editorial magazine and an artistic magazine, we mash up, we borrow, we remix. This is the premise of what we do, trying to take the most important philosophical ideas and mix them with imagery or art so that the idea comes out and that you can see the processes behind a product, the processes behind a philosophy. I don't know if you've ever tried to read Heidegger. It's really difficult. It's much easier to read Heidegger if it's through an image like this. This is obviously about technology, but more important, it's about the global class inequalities. Macintosh is selling an image. This is actually for the Mac Air. The campaign is thinner than ever. And the global underclass is also thinner than ever. And all of the products, of course, and materials that make this product come from the countries of the global underclass. So I wanted to say one more thing regarding what happened yesterday. Folia said something interesting, which is the idea of barbarism and being a barbarian is about language. And because we are trying to tackle the God of growth, we're trying to look at the language of capitalism, and specifically the language of finance. So this is your brain kind of on capitalism. And if you look at the history of economics, and the root of the word in Greek is oikos and nomos, which is household and laws, essentially household management. We don't live under that kind of notion of economy anymore. Now we live under the notion of finance. And so somewhat accordingly, the language has changed. So under the old idea of economy, the language used to describe money was generally sanitation. You need to clean up neighborhoods, for example. You need to wash society. I'm trying to think, is there a better word for that? Anyway, the language of economy was generally around the idea of sanitation. And as we're thinking today, the language of finance is the language of mental illness. The economy is depressed. The market is down. And it's quite incredible because when you think about it, it's quite obvious. And this is the fact that even our language of the dominant plagues of the West now, which is mental illness, has seeped in to the language of finance. And this is at a very profound level. And then we were talking in the cab last night because I was looking at the root word of finance. And the closest thing that they can come up with is the Latin, which is fin, or finis, which is end. And this is pretty incredible that the actual, the kind of step of global capitalism that we are in means the end. I couldn't write a better metaphor myself. Are you happy yet? So I want to talk just at the end of this section here, want to talk about one more thing also in relation to last night, which is, oh yeah, snorting. Here's a, are you depressed? Take a derivative. Global economy. Okay, so we're going to show you two sort of campaigns that we used to do back in the day to give a sense of commercial space. So, as I mentioned earlier, we don't come from a position that you can escape this algorithm. We come up from a position that you're in the algorithm and you have to use the feedback loops to your advantage. So we actively, as an organization, sought out commercial space. We even paid CNN to let us play an ad. CNN, the great Satan of American media, we gave them money to show this ad.
Can go in, if you want to visit Tibet, you have to pay China. So basically, the same thing.
The average North American consumes 5 times more than a Mexican, 10 times more than a Chinese person, and 30 times more than a person from India. We are the most voracious consumers in the world, a world that could die because of the way we North Americans live. Give it a rest. November 26 is Buy Nothing Day.
So that was for a campaign that we do every year called Buy Nothing Day, which takes place on the biggest shopping day of the year. And every year it's very interesting because there's some media outlet in the world that gets really upset. And they're like, what do you mean? Little Susie can't have a Christmas gift because you think consumption is wrong? And they'll bring us on their program. And the premise we have is, well, you let us show our ad, and we'll talk to your station. And so let me show you another one that we've done.
For years, economists have defined the economic health of a country by its gross domestic product. Trouble is, every time a forest falls, the GDP goes up. With every oil spill, the GDP goes up. Every time a cancer patient is diagnosed, the GDP goes up. Is this how we measure economic progress? Economists must learn to subtract.
So I don't know if you caught the end of that one. The volume is a little bit different, but it says economists must learn to subtract. And this is actually, that last one is actually quite old. It's something we did maybe 15 years ago, and you can even tell it's not digital. But these ideas, I mean, this is 15 years before 2008. And so these ideas have been out there. The idea that, hey, maybe this doomsday machine we're on is potentially a problem. But those two examples that we just showed you and everything we've showed you up until now is, in a sense, the pre-internet age of adbusters. The landscape has changed. The commercial space is different now. We can't just put an ad on CNN because I don't watch CNN. No one under 35 watches CNN. What are they watching? It's social media. It's internet. So our strategy has to change.
And it's important to say as well that this change with the whole social medias and the internet being available, all the information being available out there, it has a sense that CNN was, before the culture was CNN to everybody. Now it's everybody to everybody. In a sense, there's a direct, something that a blogger says, they can get a blog on CNN and this kid who's watching is basically putting both of them the same weight of paying attention to both of them. So basically there is a sort of unbalanced equation within the media.
So if you want to play in the social media world, you have to be, what we say, on your game. It changes very, very quickly. One of the ways we've done it is through kind of viral campaigns. Obviously, most people have heard of Occupy Wall Street, and this is kind of our first campaign that had an incredible amount of traction on social media, and it was just a meme. It was just a...
Yeah, there's one thing that I have to say to everybody. You can't say you haven't seen this. We can't show this poster, basically. We actually got into trouble with the artist who did the bull and the ballerina both of them were said, no, please, we don't want nothing to do with this. And actually the Boo guy, the artist who actually did the Boo, threatened to sue us. So we had to take out, and nobody actually saw it. But everything in this poster doesn't really matter. What matters, and again, goes back to what Darren was saying, is the hashtag. The hashtag says it all. It's 3 little words that basically created the meaning of this social movement.
Yeah. So what's interesting, I just keep wanting to talk about the Bull, because the letter we got from the lawyer of the Bull was really, he sued Walmart and won at one point. So we were like, oh, no, this is going to kill us. So, but it's interesting. Now, a lot of people have come up to us after Occupy Wall Street and want us to make a campaign for them. Unions, artists, government. We got invited to go to Kazakhstan. I would have gone, but actually I didn't. I couldn't get the time off, actually. But it's important to note that something like Occupy Wall Street is part of a historical moment. This meme doesn't work 2 months before. This meme maybe doesn't even work 2 months after. There isn't so much a recipe as it is just about networks of communities. The idea for the slogan and for the hashtag came out of a lot of dialogue. It wasn't just about, oh, I walked down the street, Occupy Wall Street. Yeah, let's Occupy Wall Street, make the hashtag, and everybody go. Adbusters has done hundreds of campaigns.
It's 25 years of hundreds of campaigns.
25 years of hundreds of campaigns. Very few actually succeed. And it's about trying, and it's about dipping in, and just, you can't give up. You just keep going and get more connected, and something will hit. Because as you're doing it, other people are doing it too, and you're creating a network of people who are all feeling the same thing. But of course, in America, it really, really helps that there's 10 million people, well, I'm sorry, 299 million people who were robbed by the wealthiest elite in their country and had seen no traction. So this meme came at the right time. But again, so the culture moves very, very quickly. So obviously we've seen images of Occupy Wall Street and protesters and 700 people arrested on a bridge. And within 4 months, this is what the advertising landscape looked like in North America. Sure. Sorry, this is Denmark. Wow.
Can I just say, this is what we call, and I'm not, this is a sort of a polite language to say, a mind fuck.
Let's do another one.
Yeah.
Oh, there's more.
Don't worry, don't worry.
Your life is your life. Don't let it be clubbed into dank submission. Be on the watch. There are ways out. There is light somewhere. It may not be much light, but it beats the darkness. Be on the watch. The gods will offer you chances. Know them. Take them. You can't beat death, but you can beat death in life sometimes. And the more often you learn to do it, the more light there will be. Your life is your life. Know it while you have it. You are marvelous. The gods wait to delight in you.
Just one note that you've seen, like the Brazilian artwork. The guy, the table you've seen, yeah, it's a Brazilian, basically. So everything sort of. I don't know how to start this.
As an advertiser, a writer, I mean, these are very good.
Nah, it's cool. Come on, guys, this is really cool, and I think it's just, I don't know, it takes my breath away to see this kind of thing.
It takes my breath away, but it speaks to a certain global context that we're in, and the God of growth, and the after the future generation. We'll talk about that. Maybe just play the last one,
Yeah.
Pedro.
There's only one thing I'd like to say. These ads you guys have seen are done, the director of photography is the same director of photography that do Spike Jonze films. And it's basically all the people involved in this are the top directors, directors of photography, directors of production. They're basically, these are sort of the people who we are fighting against in a sense. So basically we put out Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, and they put out this. And there's the last one we're not going to show in full because it's way too big, but just 1 second. Where are you?
By the way, the poem used, which
Oh,
is
yes.
used in the Levi's ad, is by a guy named Charles Bukowski. And Charles Bukowski, if you know Charles Bukowski, is the kind of god of American lowlife, working class. And it's a very famous poem, and the actual slogan they use is, "You can't defeat death, but you can defeat death in life sometimes." And I'm watching it going, you can't defeat capitalism, but you can defeat capitalism in life sometimes. Anyway, let's show the last one.
I want to go out there, you know, I want to be a protester, I want to bunch it up, you know.
Protesting is cool.
Whatever, you know.
Super cool.
Imagine if you live close by and you're watching this, oh my God, there's a protest going on. No, they're just shooting a video clip.
The police are protesting now. Everybody's
Oh my God, what's
doing it.
going on?
We're in a type of capitalism in the West, which we are calling, in a sense, cannibal capitalism, where it actually consumes the images of its own demise. And so we show you all of these examples to say that in the social media era, yes, you can create a meme, you can create a viral campaign, you can do something like that, but it's going to flip fast. So you always have to be on board. But Pedro, I think you have a lot to say about this in terms of this image.
This is, I've been to New York last year, and this is the latest American Apparel campaign, basically. So, and I think it's important just to say this one thing about the no future generation, what Darren was saying in a sense, that if modernism was an idea that trust in the future, postmodernism created a dystopian vision of the future. And I think in 1977 was a very important year for that because you had a lot of symbols that were created. Apple Macintosh company was open. Lockheed Martin, the biggest arms dealers in the world, was beginning operation. Star Wars was released. Elvis Presley died. You had Sex Pistols in the UK launching the No Future, God Save the Queen single. So basically you had all these things happening in this year. And I think that basically capitalism had won, decapitated any ideology, and growing up in the 80s and the 90s was about consumption, was about money, was about making money, you know, there was nowhere else to go, you know, and the whole idea of pop was solidified, basically. And I think this is where you're actually coming to, like what Darren was saying, basically, coming back to actually this sense of there's nowhere to go, and basically capital rule everything. Making money was the most important thing, and it was the only excuse, unexcusable excuse in a sense, to compete against others. And this basically creates the death of solidarity. And
Well, Pedro, that's not really fair because Pedro actually made this image.
that's a lie. It's a fake.
But I think you could probably sell this too. We could put this on the internet and they would probably send us a check. So I think we'll stop there because I'm really hoping to have a discussion, because the first half, obviously, the first half of what we talked about was about the old context and the tactics that we used. And the second half of what we talked about today is about the new context and the tactics that we're experimenting with, because just like anybody else, everything is up for grabs. So with that, I think it'd be great to start talking.
Thank you.